It's time for Paleo Radio, only on the Zachrilege Cast. Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist/secular/awesome community. This is episode 48. We are recording live on February 23rd, 2016. I would like to thank again Reese Heinen for being on last week, and please check him out on YouTube at the H&H Cast, because us casts need to stick together. The Paleo Radio show has never done an extensive breakdown on bacon, and that would be ridiculous because these guys do the news. Joe Elder and Jeremiah Bannister, aka Eagle and Dragon, or Dragon and Eagle, are platonic soulmates who do that news thing every week from the beer capital of the world, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Good evening, Paleos. I mean, Joe and Jeremiah.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Very good. And for people listening on YouTube, we will be talking to the official Paleo Radio avatar tonight just because of video issues, but the audio is going to be beautiful because that's how they do it.
It's the Shekinah glory radiating from our faces. It's dangerous to have our faces on Google Hangouts.
Yeah, well, faces for radio, that's what they call it.
Right.
Too hot for YouTube, that's what it is.
Right.
So, real quick, I don't always do this, but I feel like it's appropriate this week. We're going to do a couple out of context quotes. We got Joe out of context, Hillary Clinton is the devil. And Jeremiah out of context, I am not part of the black community. I suppose that could be in context.
Those are two wonderful out of context quotes. I love it.
And I did say that.
Oh, I know I said Hillary Clinton the devil.
I mean, listen, people can't tell right now, but if anyone who's seen pictures of me, there's a good probability that I'm not black.
And you have been white almost all your life.
Most all of it.
Yeah, me as well.
Most. A good percentage. So how did this get started? I tried to binge listen. You know, you're on, I think episode 28 will be this week. So I got through, about half or so. So how did this, how'd you start getting those sweet sounds together and start a show?
A wildly amazing trip on hallucinogenic mushrooms. Same thing that I told the people from No Religion Required. I said, boy, that was a real trip. No, in reality, we both of us were radio guys. We both are radio guys, but we were doing radio separately before we came together. And it was actually, what would you say, Joe, about a year after I left WPRR that we kind of crossed paths and started hanging out.
Yeah, Jeremiah and I were both at the same radio station in Grand Rapids, which is the one that we're on currently right now on 95.3 FM, 1680 AM and WPRR in Grand Rapids. And I was on the show Southpaws, and I still am. But Jeremiah had left for a moment, but we had become friends. And as we were talking and kind of engaging with each other, we soon discovered that we have a good chemistry, especially in our conversations. And we decided to start recording them. And from there, we began putting together Paleo Radio for a reboot.
Well, does this make you nostalgic to be on like a Google Hangout since you used to do that?
Absolutely. For me, it does.
We were just talking about it. And with all of the preparation, trying to race around and get it all coordinated, Joe kind of said, this is a reminder as to why we went podcast. It's true. I mean, it's a different medium. It's a whole different ball game. And because we pre-record now, it's all that much more different now.
Sure. And you have the advantage of editing yourself and making yourself sound even better. So that's something that you can do too.
I mean, we're already dope sauce, but now we're just at legendary levels of fame and eloquence now because we edit our own stuff. I mean, if people heard the gurglings and grunts and groanings that have come out of our throat, that have hit the cutting room floor, they'd be laughing. I mean, literally, some of that stuff we've saved. It's so funny.
Yeah, we may make a compilation one time for everybody to hear
of blunders, blunders and blusters.
Yeah, outtakes are good. I think anytime I listen to a podcast and somebody says, edit that out, you can tell it's like, oh, that's a mistake that's staying in. No, obviously, because you wouldn't have heard it otherwise.
Sealed forever.
Exactly. So what are you two, like your personal, like religious background? I know you don't have a specifically atheist show, but you do talk about religious topics on your show.
Yeah, we do. We talk about religion quite a bit. I myself, I grew up a Free Methodist basically until I was about 20 years old. I never really bought the whole thing hook, line, and sinker. I was the only one in my family that was questioning the religion. I still am the only one who's non-religious, but I have a very good relationship with my family. I'm very close with my mom and dad. But I basically was engaged in nature as a young boy. I had a lot of time to go out and see nature and observe it. And I had a lot of time to watch old documentaries. And I know that sounds like an odd way to gain yourself or get yourself to atheism, but it made it really hard for me to believe that humans had a special place on Earth that was more privileged in the sense that the whole thing was made for us, when I could see such a diversity of life. So it kind of caused questions when I was younger. And then when I got to college, it was a very easy transition out of religion and into being a secular human being.
Yeah, and I was Captain Kool-Aid. You know, I was drinking it pretty thick. I was raised Pentecostal charismatic, but we were pretty independent in our Pentecostalism. I mean, we didn't embrace ideas like the pre-tribulation rapture, for example, or that tongues was a necessary thing for the evidence of the subsequent baptism of the Holy Ghost. So, I mean, those are controversial for inside that community. But in college, I became convinced of Calvinism. I was a 5-point Calvinist. I went down the theocratic, theonomic, presuppositionalist, let's go stone gay people thing. And I did that for a while, for years, in fact. And by for a while, I'm minimizing just how evil.
Like
By the way, there's some videos.
Really good cardio, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we do have some videos of these old videos that we have. We have them up on our YouTube, I believe, just a few nuggets, correct?
I think so. And I know they're on mine. I've got one where it was when I was a Protestant pastor, and it's clips of me preaching. And I said something along the lines, it's a real gem. It's something along the lines of that evolution is a myth created by grown-ups who pretend to be scientists or something like that. I mean,
it was very wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, just complete garbage. But you know, I went through there, and then I became a Catholic in my late 20s. I left the ministry because I was a pastor. I left the ministry. You can't be a priest and be married, and I loved the ladies, and so that was kind of a thing that happened. Been married now for many years, and so became a Catholic and did radio, did journalism. And in that time, I started, it was about 4 years, I think, 4.5 years that I was a Roman Catholic, and just eventually found that the criticisms that I had against Protestantism, really honestly, Catholicism did not fix that. It didn't answer that. And so the same questions could be applied. And eventually I just embraced atheistic agnosticism. I mean, I don't take a really hard position that I know for a fact that God doesn't exist. I think that's baloney. But at the same time, my worldview and my life view have no connection really to a deity at all. And so in that way, I'm atheistic.
That's quite a range you have there. The Free Methodist, the Pentecostal, and then Catholicism. And of all those, was Catholicism like the light version?
It was.
That's all starting to believe.
Right.
Yeah, it was right out there, you know. And I thought like Sixday Creationism was a valid argument up until I was about 13, if that counts. But I think it was easier because I always had an affinity or leaning towards science. But once I saw Richard Dawkins or Carl Sagan in an astronomy class in college, really opened my eyes. But after that, you had guys like Michio Kaku come forward, and then you have Neil deGrasse Tyson, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, these type of guys that had a whole different argument, and I gravitated to that immediately. And I think it worked out in kind of a planter's fashion, because Dawkins kind of uprooted and shook everything out for me, and Sam Harris reseeded everything and kind of grew a new way of me to use logic and reason to live my life instead of woo-woo garbage.
I'm almost afraid to ask if you listened to the last week's No Religion Required with Tommy, who was talking his 6,000 year Earth. Oh, sorry, he thought it was 7, not 6.
Oh, well, hey, good. Hey, give a little plus there.
Yeah. My last time I listened to them was a couple weeks ago, because we're so busy with all the things going on. I know we're going to touch on that throughout the interview, but I caught them 2 weeks ago when Miss Ashley, the Mouth of the South, she got real ticked off, and apparently took off her headphones, walked off the set. It was real controversial. And then the following week, after all of the hubbub, the following week, I guess it was another really controversial one, and they got different reviews. But listen, I think that's good. I think it's good to get mixed reviews from people, you know, and to have people say, listen, I didn't think you did a good job on that. I look at that and say, hey, roll with it, you know, and you're always going to have it. And especially when you get more people, and throw a bone here to No Religion Required. They are rocking the daylights out of secular podcasting right now. They're really doing a great job. And their comment section, in fact, their live show, their comment section on Spreaker is unbelievable.
It's booming all the time.
Thousands of comments during their show. So, hey, you know, it happens. But no, I didn't hear their last show, but I love it. I love their show. I think they've got a brilliant thing going for them.
I probably bring this up weekly, but I almost get annoyed when I find a new show because I'm like, oh, you're great. And then I have 400 other great shows that I want to listen to. So I try to tell, well, you know, I'm doing research. So I'm researching the new show and I have to, you know, focus on that. So it's hard to listen to anything else when you're trying to, you know, get a feel for the people you're talking to.
We only have a certain amount of time in life, correct? I understand that too. It's really hard. I do the same thing with television shows. You can only have so many before you're just not a productive human being, right? I mean, we have to have our lives. We have to have the things we listen to, and hopefully Paleo Radio is one of those things that people make the time for.
And hey, it's kind of
Zachrilege.
It's kind of a luxury, I guess, and I don't want to take it for granted, but it is pretty dope having such an amazing show. And you kind of sit there and say, you know, we're really confident in one thing, and people can say, well, that sounds really arrogant. I get it. But I say, I'm really confident in this much, is that we're not fooling anybody. We're presenting ourselves, the whole enchilada, right? Good, bad, and ugly, and indifferent. And that people, that's something that is really unique, I think, in the podcast world. And everybody kind of brings their own thing, but there's an unpredictability to us too. You know, we tap into so many different topics. I mean, we've talked about things ranging from William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal all the way to football.
And intelligent design and its own the evolvability of evolution.
So it's kind of all over the map a little bit, but I'm really confident that we're doing the best we can, and I think we're doing a good job, and we're getting increasing amount of feedback to that, you know, to give us reason to believe that we're doing something that's really, it's kind of a niche in a way, and it stands out, and I hope that it does. Right, all my arrogance to the contrary. I hope that it does, and I hope that people just keep on tuning in because we give it our best every single time.
Well, how did you come up with a name? And I ask because when I first looked up paleo, you know, I was finding articles about bacon and stuff.
Yeah, bacon.
Oh yeah, of course.
The other
bacon.
kind of paleo. Sorry.
Yeah, I look up stuff about bacon every day.
I'm a bacon I had bacon this morning.
Yeah, I have an IV with bacon that goes in overnight, so I'm good during the day. But the thing is, okay, Paleo Radio started on TV. Okay, I was in college. I had a show. There were two of us, and my co-host got pulled over, and they said he was over the line for drinking. He ended up not being over the line. They let him out. He was a pariah, so I think they were kind of going after him. But they held him for a minute, and I didn't know it. I mean, we were stuck. There was no phone, no nothing. And so we said, either I'm going to sit at this public access channel at one of those tables in front of like those two fern sets, you know, it's really just kind of a dorky set. And either I'm just going to be there by myself staring at a camera, or else we're going to figure out a way to make it look like I'm not even in the building. And so we turned the cameras the complete opposite direction so that they were kind of facing a window that glared it back behind me. And we made it look like I was almost kind of on a news set that might be recording radio, and I had headphones on. And I told people that I was on the radio. I literally pretended the whole thing and pretended that it was a radio program. So many people heard it and watched it that they called the local radio station and started asking what time I was on. And they said, there is no such show. We don't know what you're talking about. So once they figured it out, there was a demand. And so it went to, I did it in college for years. I ended up doing it on WPRR. I did it for a year. I was 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. And the word, it comes from paleocrat, and that's a word I coined, as far as I know. And if anybody thinks that there's a previous time of its use, I encourage them to show me. But as far as I know, I coined this term, and it was shorthand. It was better than paleocrat radio. I figured paleo radio was easier to remember, and so I used it. And then, of course, years later, you end up having the paleo diet revolution, and now it's kind of its own thing. So there's confusion. You see a lot of stuff about bacon, and then you see us, and so that's where the name came from. And we talked about ideas about, well, should we keep it? Should we let it go? And it just, honestly, it's got a poetic ring to it. and it's easy to remember. And so we decided to stick with the name.
And there you go. So yeah, two guys who definitely look like they've had their share of bacon. So that's good to know.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Now, how do you plan? Because usually the way your show is laid out for someone who hasn't heard it before is you do different stories, and you usually do like 4 or 5 stories. And last episode you talked about some of this already, but the kind of the reaction to Justice Scalia's death, Donald Trump versus the Bushes, Canham talking about Sunday Assembly and intelligent design, or evolution being intelligent. But do you kind of have categories you try to hit, or you just try to be as wide as you can with your stories for each week?
To be honest, a lot of it is generated from our day-to-day conversations. The fact that Jeremiah and I are political junkies, we are filtering through so much stuff that our regular conversations and what we're most interested in talking about kind of rise to the top. We do like to hit on different categories, though. I mean, we're obviously we're trying to be mindful of if we have 3 political segments and 1 religious segment or something like that. But we want to throw in pop culture. We want to throw a few articles that withstand the test of time and aren't so much current events, so people get kind of a mishmash of what they'd like to see or what they'd like to hear.
And it's stuff that we just read throughout the week. I mean, I'm getting better about Twitter. I mean, that's one thing that I've really been trying to do. I get a lot of my news from Twitter, not so much from Facebook, bless its heart, but I'm just not a fan. And so I say Twitter's good, but we go through and we read a diverse array. And actually I posted a blog today about this over at Paleo Radio, .secularmediagroup.com. I posted a blog about it and said, listen, Joe and I both do this. We literally read from such a diverse array of sources that somebody can say democratic socialism. We've got sites for it. Paleoconservatism. We've got sites for it. Libertarianism. We've got sites for it. Doesn't matter. Center left, center right, doesn't matter. We read them all to try to find within these things that we can benefit from and things to criticize as well. And so, not only that, but more than that, we both have a pretty diverse friends list. Neither of us are into the whole, you better unfriend me, buddy, if you don't believe exactly like I do. Like, we're not into that. And so we have a really diverse friends list that keeps us on our toes and is always challenging things. And Joe, he challenges me all the time. I mean, he has challenged me on things that go to the core of who I've been for a long, long time. And so that whole process working together throughout the week, eventually, the fruition of that is what you hear.
Yeah, and I just adding to that, I think the one thing we can take from it is even this example, even in the Bible, there's some things you can take from it. Iron sharpens iron, right? That is something that I think with Jeremiah and I, that's kind of come to fruition when we work together. Jeremiah, just like he said about me, it's the same thing with him. He's challenged me in a lot of different things and helped me become way more diverse, particularly in study of religion. He's very, very well educated in that. He's very knowledgeable about that. So we have a wide range and wide diversity based on just kind of the way that we are and the way we've grown up and the things that we're interested in. I think it's a lot like a Venn diagram. We have a lot of things that we individually like, and then we have a lot of things in the middle, and just our daily conversations generate what we're going to put up on the show.
Yeah, I mean, Joe's a comedian. I'm not a comedian. I try to be a funny guy sometimes, but I'm not a comedian, and I'm a public speaker. That's what I do. I'm a public speaker and I'm a writer. And it's what I do. And so we bring not only our experiences and our background, different religion, different political emphases and stuff, bring that, but it's we bring the conversations that develop over the week and over the months, that go back a ways. I mean, we talk about something, we get into really heated debates. We don't do this on the show, and there's a reason for that. You can ask us later if you want. Sure. But we behind the scenes, we get into some pretty intense arguments. We do, and we give it our absolute best, and we're swashbucklers. And so that's what we do, and then we bring it to the table, and we hope that people enjoy it.
How did you guys get into the Secular Media Group, and can you show me the secret handshake?
Well, the way that we got into that actually has to do with shows just like this. And going on to Zachrilege, Jeremiah was on a show that involved David Smalley, And through that connection and through that interview, him and David Smalley kind of hit it off, and it piqued his interest. And when he had an opportunity for us, he presented it. And that's literally how it came about. And I think it's a good time to say too, what you're doing is important, man. I mean, I know that when you're doing shows and sometimes you get the low numbers, we've had shows where we've had the low numbers, or we've seen these sort of things happen, or the live shows aren't kicking in the way that you want. What really is important is the connections that are made and how it gets built up, because man, we've been doing this for not even 2 years, and already there's some really big, really exciting things happening for us. It just shows the power of technology and still social media and connection today. So I admire what you're doing as well, man. It does take talent to do live shows and live Google Hangouts. It does take talent. I can say that.
Talent, courage, lack of brains, something, just do it. Just hit the button, just rip the Band-Aid off. That's kind of how it goes.
There you go.
But thank you. And I made that joke, and you actually brought up on your last show that you're the only show on Secular Media Group that does show notes. And I only made that joke because I actually don't, download every show from there. I'm sure I just noticed that No Religion Required and Dogma Debate seems to just put like one sentence for their entire 5-hour show. And I'm like, come on, guys, give me something. And you guys have like every story you do, you have at least one link. And I'm like, there you go. That's what you try to do. Give people more information so they can, find out more. Right.
Sure. I think the big thing here is, and I don't know if it came directly from him, but I definitely was influenced by it, is, you look at a show like John Oliver, who he says, instead of doing, 9 topics and try to squeeze it into this time, I'm going to stretch out the topics and really dive into them deeper. It's a medium that people used to enjoy, and they really, really did enjoy it back. And even in I'm going back to 40s and 50s style radio where people wanted a hour-long show about one scary event or something, I think we bring that a little bit with current events, where we say, hey, we're going to do 4 topics that last 15 minutes each, and we're going to try to delve into them a little bit deeper than just kind of the surface talk of, well, this is the event. What do you think? I think yay. I think nay, yada, yada, yada. We move on. I think we go a little bit deeper than that, and that's something that most people enjoy and most people do already. A lot of people are already thinking way deeper than that level, and they just want to hear that sort of substantive talk.
I think it's our communication, journalism, and political science backgrounds too. And a real ambition to say, we don't want you to be a ditto head. We're not gurus with all the answers, passing them out like lemon drops and lollipops at a parade. We are people who are critically thinking and analyzing things and trying to better understand the world and the people in it, and how we can try to live uprightly and to live in peace without fear. These kind of things. But the way to do that, I guess, to recognize, first of all, that part of your ambition is the fact that there's other people, and to equip individuals with the tools, with the wherewithal, intellectually, socially, to make their own decisions rooted in having the information at their disposal. So if we want people to be informed and to criticize us when we're wrong, and they can't, people can better criticize us when we're wrong if they have the information. So if we talk about a topic, not just attribution for giving it to a journalist who put work and time into writing what we talked about, but also the fact that we want people to really study that, because we might be wrong on how we understand that. And being wrong has ramifications. Ideas have consequences. And so that applies to us just like everybody else. It's a two-way street for us. And I think that is literally at the core of what Paleo Radio is.
Well, I do appreciate, I think it happened on the show, you're like, hey, wait, they told both sides of the story. I'm confused. This isn't a podcast. And, I can throw in one criticism. Your Flash Gordon, cliffhangers need a little work. So, maybe next time. What's going to happen next week on an exciting episode of Paleo Radio? Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I you know what? To me, honestly, I find a value in a little bit of the cheesiness of the lead-ins and the lead-outs. I enjoy it, kind of the underdog story. I'm glad that you caught that. That's really great.
And yeah, we don't mind making fun of some of our cheesiness. We have up our sleeve Up
Yeah, I
our
know what you're talking
sleeve,
about.
we have a song, right? Joe composed a magical tune.
Played a
It's
little ditty.
fantastic. It's the best thing that anyone's ever going to hear in their entire lives when they hear it. And
I'm considering selling it to Yanni, and it's going to be a lead-in intro to our music, and it's going to screw some people up, and they're going to wonder where in the hell that came from. And it's all right, it's kind of a thing of it's okay to be self-critical and to laugh at yourself too, but one thing that I think is really important with Paleo Radio, or what we look at, is I go by kind of an 80-20 rule. Even the people that I absolutely love in politics, or even atheism or secular groups, anybody, I have an 80-20 rule. I probably agree with 80% and I disagree with about 20%. And I think that's a good angle to have with people, because you don't want someone who's all in agreeing with everything that you believe. They cannot be thinking entirely critically at that point. People have too many diverse opinions and experiences for them all to just go, yes, I agree with everything I've ever heard out of this person's mouth. I just, when we begin to question that, we get closer to what the truth really is, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like to be able to disagree with someone and still overall go with them. That's something, or even just to be friends with someone that you disagree with. That's a good thing. It keeps the brain stimulated. And I do appreciate this shows that do a little self-deprecating humor and just try to have fun with it, because it's sometimes you get too serious about this. It's like, hey, I'm just talking on a podcast. Come on, let's have some fun here.
There you go.
And
if you have it, and if it comes out, like the personality comes out, people catch on to that. And I think that's.
And we have to offset our arrogance. I mean,
Yeah.
every show. Listen,
It's a safety valve.
The headline for every podcast that we share says something about how fantastic or legendary or historic our show is. I mean, we obviously we know what's up, and most of our listeners do too. There's probably the occasional person who thinks that we're really like walking around with these massive heads trying to get through doors. But the truth is, we have to offset it. And so the self-deprecating humor, and that's just a fact. I mean, we're having honest to goodness fun. That's the point. We're having honest to goodness fun with it. We hope our listeners, we know our listeners are. I mean, it's they love it. And so it's just a good time.
So what's it like for you when the news hits close to home, like the previous weekend shootings in Kalamazoo and then the Flint water crisis?
Well, for me, it's an interesting thing, because I've never really been a flag waver. I love doing the show, but I'm not necessarily the person that says, hey, I'm going to go grab a sign. I'm going to go stand out in front of a office, or I'm going to go, picket somewhere, or I'm going to join this huge revolutionary movement. But when you see something like Flint, I mean, honestly, I get so damn angry. I have a hard time contemplating how to put that together. In both those cases, in Flint, one of my best friends that I grew up with, I went to school at a little college called Saginaw Valley State University, which is 45 minutes north of Flint. And the majority of the people I met there, I knew were from Flint. One of my best friends, it lives in the area. His grandmother, who passed, her house is in the exact area where this is happening. And it's hard to rationalize it, other than maybe this sounds really drab, but it is the way I look at it, is whether we want to admit it or not, there is alpha, beta, zeta, delta type ways of thinking here in human culture. And they other those people. They don't think of them as human, so they can take advantage of them. In the case of Kalamazoo, my girlfriend is actually from that city, and her mom lives not a couple miles from where one of those shootings occurred. And reality hits home. I mean, you understand that you're not just talking about it's not Grand Theft Auto. Like, these are real life people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's not a video game. And you wonder what the hell is going on when you can get people that are so desperate or so disconnected that they make decisions like that. I mean, I don't know. Overall, I guess I would just say it's hard to handle, but it's a reality check that lets you know that, most of the world experiences things like this way more than we do. And this comes as a shock to our entire nation. But to most people, that's like, oh, yeah, that's Thursday. And so it's a relative thing to think about, I believe.
And Kalamazoo, for me, is really close to home. I grew up in Battle Creek. I was born and raised there, and then raised my children there for most of their life, in fact. And so Battle Creek is basically a sister city to Kalamazoo. They're within 20 to 25 minutes of each other on the highway, and they're both pretty decent sized cities in the state of Michigan. So I've spent a lot of time there. I have a lot of friends there. No family, but a lot of friends. But my sister, I mean, she goes there, and they bring their kid to, there's a doctor there and stuff. So there's a lot of travel back and forth between Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. So when you hear something like that, I mean, for one, it stands out. It's really different to turn on Morning Joe and to see them talking about Kalamazoo. That's a weird thing, you know, and to see it all over the place and everybody talking about it. And yes, there really is a place called Kalamazoo. But these kind of things, they make you wonder. But I honestly, I look at it and say it happens to other people in other places, you know, and to them, it's relative to them. It's close to home to them. And so I look at it and say it's what happened that makes it close to home to me, even more than where it's located. But if it happens nearby, it's shocking. It's startling.
And I could hear the anger, the episodes you're talking about, the Flint situation, because I just hadn't read a lot in detail, but to hear that they actually had this freshwater source, it's one of the largest in the country, and they were just like, nah. And the whole running a city like a business, which seems to be the platform that, you know, Republicans always talk about, and then to see it go so badly, and then like nothing's probably going to happen to any of the higher ups there. It just, it makes you a little sad.
Yeah, and it makes you realize, you know, people do have the power. Don't get me wrong. I mean, when people do unite and make a big movement, there's changes. But so many things happen in backdoor deals that even I'm under the impression that to take a cynical point of view is a rational point of view with a lot of politics, just because the way things are framed is to give people a facade on the front and a deal in the back. And that's how this worked in Flint, particularly because we had a governor who had an emergency manager. And this is something I have to mention every time we talk about Flint,
yes,
because we have people that always in Michigan alone bring up, oh, look at what happens with the government, how the government treats you, yada, yada, yada. This was lack of government. The governor elected an emergency manager who was unelected and had no power by the people. He was not appointed in any way, and he overruled everything and every Democratic decision that happened from the mayor on down in the city of Flint. They did the same thing in Benton Harbor. They did the same thing in Muskegon. They did the same thing in Detroit, Michigan. And now Kevin Orr, who was in Detroit, is in Atlantic City helping Chris Christie out, doing the same thing to Atlantic City, which I can't wait to hear stories from there. I will almost bet the farm that we'll see that in a year, something going on there, because it's removing the government from the entire position and giving it away to austerity.
To an autocrat.
Absolutely.
I mean, fundamentally a dictator, you know, somebody who says to a city commission says, well, you can go ahead and have meeting minutes. In fact, it would still be required. But even if you beg and plead, which they did, even if you beg and plead, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We don't have to, of any necessity, listen to you. And our primary focus has nothing to do with health or anything like that, but it has to do with the bottom line. And I look at it like this. I say it's easy to find where the buck stops when you've got an autocratic system. Like, it makes it easy. You've just gotten rid of all the competition. Who benefits from this? Who's the person who made this damn decision? You find out really easily in an autocratic setup. And you got an autocrat with the emergency financial manager, and that is a direct bat phone straight to the governor. There's not a whole bunch of in-betweens between an emergency financial manager and the governor's office that put him there. And so people, listen, Joe and I have been in this fight, right, on the front lines on the radio in Michigan here, talking about this consistently for years now. But Joe's right, and people need to hear this. A lot of people get their news in things that require or largely depend on visuals. But visuals, you know, it's easy to have a visual with people carrying bottled water, right? That's an easy thing. It's not when trying to describe emergency financial management, but emergency financial management is the problem. That's right. If we didn't have that situation, it would have been highly, and by highly, I mean radically, unlikely that anything like this would have happened. No way. And this is the last thing I'll say. This obviously pisses me off.
This pisses me off too.
But this is obviously you got me, bud. I look at it and I say, go back, everybody. Go to MSNBC, and I don't say this all the time. Go to MSNBC. Go to MSNBC and go to Rachel Maddow. She had a town hall in Flint. Look at those people in the crowd. Look at every single one of them, all the different shapes and sizes, almost all of them African American, a lot of them African American. And look at that and say, these people are going to deal with a mental health and criminal justice crisis that is without comparison right now, as far as I'm aware of, maybe in the United States, maybe ever, for us to say, man, this has contaminated people in such a way. The ramifications of this are massive. And I looked at those people and I said, I tried to imagine what the mom in one of the rows, if she's looking at her kids and she's loving them and she's weeping because of this. And after years, give it 2 years, 3 years, all of a sudden that their behavior starts getting erratic,
changing.
All of a sudden they're now incapable of doing certain physical tasks, whereas before it was an easy thing for them to do. This is the reality that those parents and those grandparents face, and it could happen to them. That's the other thing. Mama could be perfectly fine. Daddy could be perfectly fine. 2 years down the road, they might be completely out of their mind. They might be violent. All of this stuff. It is absolutely terrible. And the fact that the governor had to go and try to find not just one, but 2 PR firms to try to save his rear end, it says an awful lot. People need to be far more critical of this and not just talk about the water, but talk about the crimes, the stuff that should seriously be crime.
Yeah.
You got me shaking. I love your show. It's official.
Oh, yeah. Get everybody really riled up and not in a good way. But I don't know. I figure we might as well transition to keep going with the whole politics thing. I mean, we're talking a lot about the presidential election, but it seems to be a lot of the stuff happening at the the state level that's causing all these issues. I don't know. Does it seem like America's past the tipping point? What with our legislatures being full of wannabe preachers and people who apparently hate the government?
Well, I don't know if we're past a tipping point, but we're definitely seeing, I believe, and I know this is it's only opinion and conjecture, but we're seeing a lot of angry people and a lot of sporadic voting in the sense of, or I shouldn't say voting, but a lot of sporadic opinion in terms of liberals and conservatives and that whole jive. I think people they're sick of their everyday Congress, because I mean the approval rating for Congress is just absolutely abysmal, and I think that people are sick of that, but at the same time they don't know their congressman, and my real complaint is not really with the idiots that are in there, but it's the people that really are so complacent that they're not consciously getting those people out. And you can't really look too far, you can't look very far into politics without really blaming the people that are watching it and letting it happen. But I will say, too, I think gerrymandering really makes the big difference, because how people are governed at a smaller level really affects their everyday life. And if you have an austerity type of congressman, or you have somebody like a senator who has been in for a very, very long time, and those people have instilled their political ideology on you for a while, you really don't have as much leeway, and you get affected more directly by that person every day than you will by your president.
And I look at it and I say, people are tired of the game, man. I mean, they just are. Look at the whole fiasco going on with Scalia, for example. This is literally macrocosm of the problem. You have the Democratic Party in literally a lame duck situation, and to sit there and say, we're going to go ahead and put this person forward. It's your responsibility. Where in the Constitution does it say that we shouldn't go through this process? Yada, yada, yada. I happen to side with that. But the problem is they didn't side with that when the role was reversed. And if you go back, you can see this over and over and over. And here's the thing, man, is that TV news and politics, they're butt buddies. I mean, that's,
they are.
These guys love each other. And you sit there and you say, when you have that, people can go back in history, and the people who do it the best, Jon Stewart, right? He did it fantastically. John Oliver does it fantastically. But now the mainstream news is figuring it out, and they're able to delve into the depths of C-SPAN and find these quotes that people had that are completely opposite of where they are now, and they're speaking with the same force of conviction. They're denying that they ever held anything contrary to that, and they're all having to face the piper. And the thing is, we see this every single day, and Americans have seen it for decades now, and they're sick and tired of the way it's played, and they're seeing something they've always kind of known, and you can see it in the way it plays out even in fiction, but that there's theater to politics, that politics is theater. But now they're seeing it, and they're seeing it played out in a medium that's sensationalistic to the core. That's been radically changed by the Buckley v. Dow debate. If you want to know more about that, you can go back and listen to our segment on it. But if you want to, the last thing I'll say, for more of my thoughts on that exact thing, I have a video called America the Great, where I describe the reasons why I think we are beyond a certain point. And that it's not just conservatives. It has a lot to do with just our size, how many people we have now, how big of a country we are, technology and travel. And that these things were not considerations at the time of our framing. I think the framing for the time was brilliant and genius. We're not the same country as the Federalists wrote about. We just simply aren't. And if those are necessary preconditions that made sense of that system, then we have just cause, in my opinion, we have just cause to question that reason now.
Yeah, do you think there's hope on the conservative sides? Like, what can an actual person who really is a conservative take from the current presidential crop? So it looks like we're getting down to like Trump, Cruz, and Rubio at this point.
I think, honestly, the problem with where we're at right now is I think it kind of ebbs and flows, right? It's kind of like waves crashing onto the beach. It builds up in a tidal wave. And right now, if you were to say that you need to put your bank into the millennials and repitch the idea of educating them about the classical conservatives like Dwight Eisenhower, you can try to do that. And I think that's the correct way to save the party if you want to be a classical conservative. The thing is, if you do that right now, you're going to lose your base, which is a bunch of 50 to 60-year-old white people, to be frank. And that group of people they're not ready. They don't believe that the tenets of Dwight Eisenhower are even Republican anymore. This idea of highways across the whole entire nation that the government's going to pay for it. If that whole idea was instilled today, like maybe let's think of one like, rail cars or high-speed trains. We can't get that now because that seems like a crazy notion. That's just classical conservatism. Single-payer healthcare. That was a two-party system issue 30 years ago. I think you can teach people about what it was like to be a classical conservative back in the day, and that's not really that dangerous of a person. In fact, I agree with a lot of those things, but it involves such an investment in the front end of what's happening that you're really basically saying we're going to get our asses whooped and wiped on the floor for maybe 15 to 20 years to make this happen. I kind of question if we'll see it come back entirely, because I think it will splinter off and continue to splinter off the way it's been doing.
And there's a lot of different schools of conservative thought. It's not necessarily reflected right now in a presidential election, but I don't know if I would ever presume it to be the case that would happen, right? Like I don't. To a certain extent, conservatism historically has been counterculture. I mean, that might be a radical thing to say. But historically, it kind of has been. It's been kind of the leave us alone crowd, right? We don't want you. We want you very tiny because then we can talk back to you. Whereas if you're big, we're pleading or we're scared. And so I look at it now and I say, it depends, it depends on what kind of conservative people want. And there's a decent selection right now. I mean, you look at it and you say, to represent conservatism in America. I mean, you've got Marco Rubio, which for all intents and purposes, he's a neocon. He's of the line of compassionate conservatism. I mean, that's the truth. Whereas Cruz is more populist oriented in some ways, right? But he's still tied to banks. He still needed Goldman Sachs money to even get off the ground at all. And so You got him. Donald Trump's a weird thing because he's not really a conservative. If you took out his personality completely, if you wiped it out and just made it neutral, he's just a guy, and you took his beliefs, you might be talking something similar, maybe like a modern extension of Bull Moose stuff. I don't really know how to categorize that. I think it's a hodgepodge of many different. It's eclectic. It doesn't neatly fit within the tradition of conservatism. It does, however, fit within the tradition of nationalism, and both progressives and liberals and conservatives can be nationalistic. And so with him, Kasich's kind of he's kind of a compassionate conservative. He's taking that, but he's taking it up another level by being more accepting of the LGBT community. And people should praise him for that, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's so great with the ladies, but
Right.
Yeah,
Well, hey, I'll be controversial again. I'll go to bat for Kasich on this one. I will. And listen, correct me. People should correct me if I'm wrong. They can do that at paleoradioshow@gmail.com. Attention, Jeremiah. So, but I would say this. I would say within his statement, for one, he's talking about the 1970s. He's also talking about very conservative, largely religious women from the 70s who would go out to vote for him to get him elected. That would be his fundamental base. And he said within his statement, he said, things have changed. It's a lot different now. And he said you can call somebody to try to get somebody to answer the phone. He said back in the 70s or whatever, somebody would answer the phone, and oftentimes it would have been a woman. But now there is nobody answering the phone, whether because they have to go work or because they want to go work, whatever their choice is. But the things had changed. And he granted it. The girl who said, well, I'm not coming out of the kitchen. He said, yeah, you got it. And he kind of said the same thing to her. Plus, his campaign manager is a woman. And she was also his assistant, his top aide, chief of staff, I guess, or whatever, when he was governor, or as a governor. And now she's chief of staff of his campaign. And he said that she would hold a prominent position inside of his cabinet. So that's my case for Kasich's defense on this. I just don't know how much we should criticize him. That's the extent of my claim.
Yeah, I think when he said they left their kitchens, I think he was saying it metaphorically the same way that people say go back into the kitchen. He was kind of like saying, hey, this argument's null and void. I think it just was kind of a tasteless way of saying it, that to be honest, I think it was just he said it in a not very clever way.
He defunded Planned Parenthood, but that seems to be mainstream now.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think if you want a Republican vote, that's almost a necessity. I mean, you just can't. You're not going to get a Republican nomination at all if you don't stand against it.
Other than Donald Trump did. Donald Trump did, right? Yeah.
Our local House of Representatives guy, and here's what he's selling himself on. We put a bill on the president's desk to repeal Obamacare, defund Planned Parenthood, and slash one-way Washington spending. Basically, he told me that he failed. And that's how you should stay behind him because of what he's trying to sell. But yeah, politics.
Sure.
That's a terrible narrative. I mean,
I think
it's a losing narrative.
I only think it's a terrible
at this point anyway.
I'm sorry, Zach, repeat that. I apologize.
So I'm in the state of Georgia, so we're pretty much a one-party state.
Yeah. Well, I think when someone says something like that, or you remember when the House, how many times did they send up to vote against Obamacare? Like 44 or something crazy.
Massive.
Right? This is because, my true opinion is, this is because the campaign bleeds into the governance more than the governance bleeds into the campaign. And people are running even while they're in office, and they just continually beat this cycle up. So what they want to do is say, look, we put it up 44 times, or I voted against Obamacare 44 times. You really want me, America? Look how often, how dedicated I am. And they know that these are just show bills that they're throwing up there. You want to know when one is going to get passed is when it gets so much fat on it, that you can cook it for a lot of bacon. And that's when you know.
I think they do that too on the flip side, because that's where they do this showmanship kind of thing, knowing that their bill's not going to pass, so that they can then say they did, not just that they went against something, but that they went for something, which is when you listen to debates, you'll hear this all the time. I heard this a lot with Hillary and O'Malley and them during the Democratic debate, where they said, I advanced this, or I sponsored this, But then you find out those things didn't pass, and you say that's a good thing. But if you know that it's not going to pass, if you know that is a form of showmanship, you're kind of putting it in the bank for a later time to say, well, I can bring this back out and say, hey, I advanced this in the past and did this, and that's okay, right? But I don't think there's much to it.
That's true. Well, we're getting down to about 10 minutes to go, so I have to ask, Jeremiah, could you talk about Team Tiny Dancer and your story?
You know, I'll tell you. First, let me say this, just so that I won't forget. But tomorrow, from 7 to 9 p.m. at Ferris State University in Big Rapids, Michigan, Samantha and I are going to be presenting God and Cancer, the Team Tiny Dancer story. And this is going to be hosted, I said it in the video, I call them my super friends, over at Secular Student Alliance. And so super pumped. I went there last year, almost the exact same time. It was a terrible storm, but people made it out. And there was an interfaith panel. So there were people, there was a Muslim, there was a Protestant, and there was myself. And that was the only time that I ever saw them. And it's because Justin Schieber from Real Atheology, he's a local friend of ours here, and he wasn't able to make it. He double booked, and so he needed help. So we're going to be there tomorrow, and my daughter's so pumped because she has her own business cards now. And my wife made the business cards. They're amazing. They look so cool. Doctor Who themed, just saying. So, but my daughter, right, just giving you the short of it all. March of 2015, we brought her into the hospital because we thought, or into the eye doctor because we thought she needed glasses, and we found out that she didn't. And through talking to a couple other doctors who sent us immediately to the Helen DeVos Children's Hospital here in Grand Rapids for an MRI, we found out that she has a very rare and deadly form of childhood cancer. She has a grade 3 anaplastic astrocytoma. It's in the shape of a star, and it has great potential for growth. And so on average, if you look at happy statistics for this, about 25% of the kids will live 5 years or more. On the sad end of these things, you have about 8% that will live 5 years or more. The recurrence rate is about 2.5 years. And because of where it's located, it's in her thalamus. And so it's in a very, very risky place. They called it prime real estate, and they could only get out a certain amount. After a 17-hour brain surgery, they got out about 70%. The radiation we went through, and we maxed out for quality of life. The radiation that we used melted, and that's quote unquote, that's what the term they used, melted the tumor. But the question always has to do with recurrence. And they try to keep an eye on it. You know, you go through chemo. She's doing chemo indefinitely for the rest of her life. I mean, this is part of what we're dealing with here. And so the chemo, though, doesn't make cancer disappear. Chemo keeps it and tries to put kind of a block on it growing rapidly. And so it slows it down and tries to even bring it down to a halt. But with this kind of cancer, by and large, that doesn't work. And so when there's a recurrence, it becomes a little worrisome. And after 9 months, we experienced our recurrence. And so she has about, it's the size of a pea, they said. So it's very small. It was the size of a golf ball when we went into the hospital. It's the size of a pea right now, but they would have to add a third chemo to her regimen because she's on chemo through her port every 2 weeks. And she's on a 5-day pulse at the beginning of the month on a different kind of chemo. And then they would be adding this one. But this one has very, very unfortunate side effects. It has things that are very unpleasant, and you have to medically monitor what is going on. And so our doctors are at a phase, and this is the last thing I'll say. They're at the phase now where they're beginning to look into clinical tests and trials. In the United States, currently, there is one. Kids die very quickly with this disease, and they can't do a lot of tests. And it would require our family to leave the state, to leave our home, and we would be at one of 3 places. We would be at a hospital in Chicago, or the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, or at St. Jude. And we're hoping the last one. We're hoping that that's where we can go, because it wouldn't bankrupt us, because they take care of you. They cover your stay. They cover a great number of things while you're there. It's what makes them so different and so amazing. And so we're in a place where we're looking for these things. And I'll say this to every listener: if you follow me, I encourage you to follow us at hashtag Team Tiny Dancer. Okay. And you can find me on Facebook, Jeremiah.Bannister. But more importantly, we have teamtinydancer.com that's going to be revealed tomorrow. And I encourage you, follow it, because there's going to be a time, I can promise you now, that there will be a time where we are going to call on every person we know to write a testimonial about my daughter and what she means to them and what they've learned and how they've grown to be better people through knowing her. And we are going to blast the daylights out of St. Jude. So I know it's going to happen. It's a matter of time. And we're pushing it as far away as we can, because she really wants to do things. When I told her about this and I told her the options that she has, she was crying and she said, "These are all really bad." And I said, "I know, you have to put it on a scale and try to see which one you want to do. And that's part of our thing." And she looked at me and she said, "But does that mean that I can't speak to Secular Student Alliance or Center for Inquiry?" And I sat there and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, we're talking about relocating because of this, and you're really wanting to do this." And so keep an eye on us. And I think it'll be available sometime tomorrow before the event, because we're passing out her new business cards and people can go, and there will be something on the site that has our GoFundMe, our PayPal, a basic description, and some of the blogs that we've written, including the stuff to do with Make-A-Wish, which is an amazing organization. If anybody can help them, listen, that organization changes lives. And our experience, it was life-changing. And I'm sorry for crying. I'm sorry for crying. This is a big thing, and I'm really glad that you gave me the time to say all of that. And I hope that if people fear that they didn't get all of that, that they go and watch this again and rewind the whole thing and listen to all of it. It's awesome.
Well, I will have extensive show notes, and feel free, the two of you, to send me as many links as you have to make sure I cover all the bases for you, because I don't have kids, but I know you're going through a really tough time, and all the best wishes are to you. And I really think it's great that you're talking like you are. You're being open with the struggle you're going through, and I think it's going to help a lot of people, because you don't know what to do. I mean, this it's life changing, right? Everything changes. So I think you're making the best out of a terrible situation.
Thank you.